Hey church, Pastor Shane here, another community group discussion starter video. This week we are continuing in the book of Acts. We got to the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, which is a really interesting story because of just some really unique features about it. Remember that in Acts chapter 8, the gospel is continuing to go out into the larger region. So far it had been pretty localized in Jerusalem. But God's plan for the church is different than it was in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, the plan for kind of spreading the goodness of God was that people would come and see, that they would see how good and just God is by observing the Israelite people, God's people, and seeing how his laws were just and his laws were good. And through that, the peoples of the world would come to know God as well. That was kind of his plan for drawing people to himself, was through his people and them coming to them and seeing them. It's a little different in the New Testament. In the New Testament, it's kind of all about going out. While the gospel started near the site of the temple, or the spread of the gospel started at the site of the temple in Jerusalem, God's plan for the New Testament is for us to go out to the people. And so after persecution came and scattered the Christians, God used that event to move forward the gospel and spread it throughout the entire region. And Philip meeting the Ethiopian eunuch is one of those stories. But there's several key things that make this story unique. One, that God took Philip out of this thriving ministry to just go find this one person in the middle of this kind of desert type road. That the Ethiopian eunuch is an interesting person himself. As a eunuch, according to Deuteronomy chapter 23:1, he wouldn't be allowed to worship in the inner parts of the temple with even other proselytes. And so he was kind of an outsider in that way, restricted in some senses. Also not a Jewish person, also an Ethiopian, but also a God-fearer. So he's kind of hard to categorize in that way. And that's who God sends Philip to seek out. And then after Philip kind of shares the gospel and the Ethiopian believes and he is saved and is baptized, Philip disappears and God transports him to another city some distance away. And God seemed really wanted to reach this Ethiopian eunuch. And it just shows how God pursues people, even people we would think were unlikely. This guy in the middle of the desert who doesn't kind of fit into the normal categories of who the gospel is being shared to so far, which has been mostly the descendants of the Israelites, but yet still kind of not quite a Gentile in the same sense. It's just really interesting how God pursues people. And that's what we mostly talked about, that God's grace is for all who believe. He pursues unlikely people. He pursues the outsiders. And we see that all throughout the scriptures. We see God pursue and call out people who may not be the people we expect. I think of David. David, who was the youngest of his stronger brothers, who's the weakest, and yet he was the one that God chose to be king, not the strongest, oldest of the brothers, but the youngest, which is kind of interesting. We see a lot of outsider imagery like that throughout the scriptures. We see Jesus act this way too, always reaching out to people that other people wouldn't expect. Like in John 4, the woman at the well, or the way he would eat with sinners and even the tax collectors. God just has this habit of reaching out to unlikely people because God doesn't care about our background or our history when it comes to his pursuing us. What he wants is people who are going to trust in Jesus Christ. And so he pursues all kinds of people. And that should encourage us that God is pursuing us. And we should accept his grace. And we should also be looking to join in God's plan to pursue others as well. That we would follow kind of in Philip's footsteps, being obedient to God to share with whoever God brings into our path. And especially that we should never count anyone out. I think it was great that we did baptisms this morning as we were preaching this. Baptism is just that reminder of what we have in Jesus Christ. And even if we aren't being baptized, we kind of remember our story through that. And so you might share as part of your group not only about these scriptures, and I put some other ones in there as well that connect well, but also just about the baptisms that you saw, what you observed about how God was working in their lives, and then maybe even recall how God has worked in your life as you think about your own baptism and where he has brought you. It's amazing the generosity and the mercy and grace that God has shown us. I hope you have a great discussion.